Hey everybody, welcome back to the Zero Hour. There's a poem I like to remember on the 4th of July from a beat poet named D.A. Levy. He's not well known, but the poem is called The Bells of the Cherokee Ponies. Like a lot of the beat poets of his time, D.A. Levy went to San Francisco, which was the epicenter of the beat movement, but pretty quickly he returned to his hometown, which was Cleveland, Ohio. Why? I don't know, but I think he had a sense of place. I think he was rooted in the soil, in the American soil, in the soil under the streets and the sidewalks of his hometown of Cleveland. That's where he lived, and that's where he died. The poem makes me think of my hometown in a way. My hometown is Utica, New York, and it begins like this. I thought they were wind chimes in the streets at night. With my young eyes, I looked to the east, and the distant ringing of ghost ponies rose from the ground. It always makes me think the same thing when I begin to hear this poem or read this poem, and that's this. The people who run this country economically and politically say they love it. They say they love this country, but you can't love this country if you don't love the land. If you desecrate the ground we walk upon, then you don't love the land. If you pursue your own interests only and ignore the fate of the planet, you don't love the land. If you allow those who walk these lands before us to remain in poverty, you don't love this land. Why quote an obscure and long-dead poet on the 4th of July? Isn't this a time for brass bands and fireworks? Sure it is, but somewhere up there in the rocket's red glare, I think those long-dead ponies still run. The poem goes on to say the underground horses are rising. When I was growing up in Utica, New York, it was so corrupt that Life magazine put it on the cover and called it Sin City, USA. We were so proud of that in grade school. I was 9 years old. We were on the cover of Life magazine. Every 4th of July, we'd watch the fireworks from a little park near our house. Railroad tracks ran through the park, and some days I would go down there and I'd look down those straight, rusted tracks as far as I could see, probably not even past the outskirts of town, and I'd imagine I was seeing Nebraska or Indiana or California or Europe or all the other places I'd heard of and never seen. Utica was in the Mohawk Valley, still is, of course, named for the tribe that used to live there and run the place. The Mohawks weren't always a peaceful people. After all, blood is in all our histories. But they were part of the Iroquois Confederacy. They had a great history. The 5 nations of that confederacy had negotiated peace, developed a common currency, and created a constitution before they ever came into contact with Europeans. We learned that in school. We also learned that they lost their land. Did we ever dream in those days in Utica, New York, that one day we'd lose ours? Because we did. Large sections of Utica are ghost towns now. The factories are empty and falling down. The house I was born in is abandoned and collapsing. When I visited there a couple years ago, dealers were selling crack from the house next door. Soon they'll be gone too. The poem goes on to say, Cherokee, Delaware, Huron, we will return your land to you. We can still return the land to its rightful owners by recognizing its value and by remembering those owners, the previous inhabitants, and treating them with justice and equality. They're our ancestors too. We're joined forever by the common covenant of this land. Says the poem, the young horses will return your land to you to purify the land with their tears. Meanwhile, environmental standards have been relaxed, which is a pretty bucolic word for an act of violation, all over this country. Our greed and consumption is threatening the very planet we depend on for survival. People are barely beginning to awaken to the urgency of our situation, what's being done to us by political and business leaders, as if there's a difference anymore, who are already buying retirement homes in Dubai or somewhere else where they'll be safe from the consequences of their action. Meanwhile, we need to be reminded of the interconnectedness of life. Does that sound new agey to you? It won't sound that way till 75 years from now if you're still around to feel the heat and the cold, watch the floods and observe the suffering. The underground horses are rising to tell their fathers. In the streets at night, the bells of the Cherokee ponies are weeping. I'm going to a potluck later. There I'm going to talk with some old friends and watch fireworks with my godchildren. I'm just another American who loves his country and his Constitution. I'll be eating potato chips and watching rockets with the crowds. But I'll try to remember that I'm standing on this land, American land, native land, the same land our ancestors walked, the land we should be leaving for our descendants. And I'll listen for the sound of bells. Happy Interdependence Day from the Zero Hour.